I never thought I would get married a second time. After a disappointing first marriage, I told myself I would live alone, focus on my career, and enjoy life on my own terms. But then, fate led me to Daniel, a man completely different from my past. He didn't just show me what real love was. He made me believe that happiness was still waiting ahead. If there's one thing I am certain of in my life, it's that I have never regretted my decision to get divorced, and even more so, I have never regretted choosing to move forward with Daniel. I am 38 years old now and have been married to Daniel for 5 years. We don't have children, but that has never been an issue between us. Instead, we cherish our marriage in our own way, always making time for each other no matter how busy life gets. Daniel is a man of his word. He has never missed any of our date nights. Every month on our small anniversaries, he plans something special. Sometimes it's a simple dinner at home with wine and candles. Other times it's a short getaway to the seaside, a place I love. With Daniel, I always feel valued, something I never truly experienced in my first marriage. Tonight is no exception. Daniel made a reservation at an upscale restaurant right by the San Francisco Bay. He told me the place had a breathtaking view of the ocean, with twinkling lights reflecting off the water as night falls. I had been looking forward to it all week, not just because of the restaurant but because I knew that being with Daniel would make everything feel special. I once thought love was a luxury that wasn't meant for me, but perhaps I was wrong. That evening, the restaurant Daniel had chosen was even more beautiful than I had imagined. Perched on a cliff overlooking the bay, it was surrounded by large glass windows, reflecting the warm glow of golden lights. Elegant white tablecloths covered every table, with flickering candles adding to the ambiance. The soft melody of a piano played in the background, making the atmosphere even more romantic. I gazed at Daniel across the table, his eyes filled with the familiar warmth as he poured me a glass of wine. "Do you like it?" Daniel smiled, his voice deep and gentle. "I love it," I replied, unable to hide my happiness. We enjoyed our dinner, our conversations flowing effortlessly. Daniel always knew how to make me feel at ease and appreciate every moment together. I thought tonight would be perfect, a peaceful anniversary celebration, untouched by the past. But fate always seems to have a way of testing people. As we neared the end of our meal, Daniel stood up, gently kissing my forehead before stepping away. "I'll be right back. Wait here for me." He left the table to head to the restroom, while I turned toward the large glass window, letting myself get lost in the beauty of the ocean at night. I didn't know how long I had been staring, lost in thought, until a familiar yet distant voice spoke from behind me. "Still love watching the ocean, huh? But for someone like you, no matter how beautiful the sea is, it won't change reality." My entire body froze. A chill ran down my spine as I slowly turned my head. And then I saw him. Jim Turner. The man I once called my husband 10 years ago. He sat down right in the seat Daniel had just left, as if it belonged to him. A wave of discomfort washed over me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Jim hadn't changed much since the last time I saw him, still wearing that smug expression, his narrow eyes filled with condescension. His suit looked expensive, but his face bore the undeniable marks of time. He no longer had the sharp, confident appearance he once did. I crossed my arms and kept my voice steady. "It's been a long time, Jim." Jim scoffed. "Ha, I never thought I'd run into you in a place like this. So, you can actually afford a fancy restaurant?" He glanced around before leaning back in his chair, smirking. "Or is this a special occasion? A once-a-year anniversary dinner you had to save up for?" I exhaled, feeling nothing but pure disgust. He was still the same. Still looking down on me. Still acting as if he were somehow superior, even though we had long ceased to be a part of each other's lives. "That's unfortunate, Jim, but you're wrong." I offered him a small, knowing smile, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm here because my husband wanted to bring me, not because I had to save up, and certainly not because I couldn't afford it." Jim let out a loud laugh, shaking his head. "Your husband, huh? Some average nobody? Don't tell me you were dumb enough to marry another broke guy." I didn't respond, only looking at him with unwavering calm. Jim, emboldened by my silence, leaned forward, crossing his arms. His voice dripped with mockery. "What is it? Don't tell me you're still wearing cheap clothes like before, or maybe your new husband isn't any better than me, just barely scraping by. bringing you here once and then dragging you back to a miserable life? I remained silent, but deep inside, a slow-burning anger was beginning to rise. I didn't regret leaving this man, but I despised the way he continued to treat me like a joke. I glanced toward the restroom, hoping Daniel would return soon, but just at that moment, Jim let out a chuckle. Or maybe, he said slowly, his eyes gleaming with mockery, you still haven't told him about your past? About the fact that you were once married to Jim Turner, a successful man? I narrowed my eyes. Successful? I let out a laugh, unable to hold it back. Really? Are you still a successful man? If that's the case, where's your wife? Or are you out here alone, hunting down old flames to vent your frustrations? Jim clenched his jaw, his expression darkening for a brief moment. But before he could respond, a deep, steady voice spoke from right behind me. Excuse me, but you're sitting in my seat. I looked up. Daniel stood there, his face calm, though his sharp gaze was clearly assessing the situation. And from the way he was looking at Jim, I knew. This wasn't over yet. Daniel pulled out his chair and sat down beside me, his eyes briefly scanning Jim with a cool indifference. I could see his composure, but I also knew that Daniel wasn't the type to tolerate disrespect easily. Jim leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest with a smirk. Oh, so this is your husband? He slowly looked Daniel up and down before scoffing. He looks decent, I guess, but let me guess, he's not exactly wealthy, is he? Just another average office worker, right? Daniel didn't respond immediately. He simply took a sip of his wine, then set the glass down on the table, his gaze sharp but his tone steady. I don't think I need to prove anything to you. Jim burst into laughter, dripping with sarcasm. Oh, you're smooth, I'll give you that. But let's be real here. I know exactly what kind of woman Sandra is. She never had anything of her own. If you married her, that must mean you're not much better off yourself. I tightened my grip around my wine glass. Not because Jim's words hurt me, because they didn't. But because he still had that same attitude, still saw me as someone beneath him, even after all these years. Jim tilted his chin up, his voice full of arrogance. I'm different. I come here all the time. This restaurant is one of my favorites, not just some place I visit on rare occasions. He turned to me slowly, his smug grin widening. You must have saved up quite a bit just to be here tonight, huh? I didn't respond, only staring at him in silence. But Daniel calmly placed his hand on the table, his voice still composed yet filled with meaning. You say you come here often? Of course, Jim leaned back with a shrug. Unlike you two, I can come here any time I want. I make enough money to enjoy the finer things in life without worrying about it. At that moment, a woman approached our table. I recognized her immediately. Monica, the woman Jim had left me for. But now she no longer had the glow of the past. Her face was etched with exhaustion, her skin had lost its youthful vibrancy, and her eyes were filled with tension. The dress she wore seemed elegant but no longer fit properly, as if it had been bought years ago. Monica placed a bill on the table in front of Jim, her voice sharp. They said you need to pay now. Jim flinched slightly but quickly regained his arrogance. He pulled out his wallet, though his movements were slow, as if he was calculating something. Daniel glanced at me, then leaned in slightly, speaking just loud enough for me to hear. Do you really think he comes here often? I didn't answer, but a small smile played on my lips. Jim handed his credit card to Monica, who passed it to the server. The server, however, hesitated before looking at him apologetically. I'm sorry, but this card has been declined. Jim's face darkened immediately. Monica crossed her arms, glaring at him. You said you come here all the time. Why is your card declined? Jim stammered awkwardly. Maybe there's an issue with the bank. Let me try another card. But just as he pulled out a second card, Daniel let out a quiet chuckle. Seems like things aren't quite as you claimed, huh? Jim shot Daniel a glare, but he had no comeback. I could see his hand clenching tightly, as if trying to suppress his frustration. Monica let out a tired sigh, shaking her head. This is the last time I go out with you. She turned and walked away, leaving Jim sitting there, stunned and humiliated. I leaned back in my chair, slowly lifting my wineglass to take a sip. So, you said you come here often? Looks like tonight was an exception then. Jim gritted his teeth but had nothing to say. Daniel simply smiled, then placed his hand on the table. Our dinner is finished, my love. He looked at me, his gaze gentle. Shall we go? I nodded, rising to my feet alongside Daniel. Jim remained seated, watching us leave. and for the first time in years I felt completely free from the shadow of my past. Jim tried to salvage his dignity after Monica left. He cleared his throat, attempting to regain his confidence. Looking at me and Daniel with a challenging gaze, he straightened his posture. "Well, I don't really care about trivial matters like this anyway," Jim shrugged, trying to appear indifferent. "Money issues are only temporary. I'm a senior manager at Anderson Corporation. My salary easily covers nights like this." I almost laughed but kept my composure. Daniel remained unfazed, leaning back in his chair comfortably, his eyes fixed on Jim, as if waiting to see what else he had to say. Jim continued boasting. "You know, Anderson Corporation isn't just some ordinary company. I have a respectable position there. I'm not some low-level employee. Being a manager at such a large corporation means I never have to worry about money." He glanced at me, his expression triumphant. "Some people are lucky enough to escape poverty by marrying someone more well-off. But Sandra, this is as far as you'll ever go. You'll never reach the level I have." Daniel chuckled softly, then casually pulled a card from his wallet and placed it on the table. It was a sleek black card, its metallic surface gleaming under the restaurant's ambient lighting. The waiter immediately bowed respectfully and took the card. "Thank you, Mr. Kingston. We will process your payment right away." A heavy silence fell over the table. I saw Jim's face stiffen. He stared at the card as if he couldn't believe his eyes. What?" he stammered, his eyes wide with confusion. The waiter soon returned, handing the card back to Daniel along with the receipt. "Thank you very much, Mr. Kingston. It's an honor to serve you." Jim furrowed his brows. "Wait, Kingston?" He turned to me, suspicion creeping into his voice. "Don't tell me it can't be." I gave him a small smile, crossing my arms as I met his gaze directly. "My husband is Daniel Kingston, the chairman of Anderson Corporation." Jim froze. His mouth opened slightly as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. Tilting my head slightly, I continued in a light yet pointed tone. "So Jim, you really do work at Anderson Corporation, don't you? I assume you're quite familiar with the chairman then?" Jim's face drained of color, then quickly turned red. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure, but the sheer shock was undeniable. Daniel looked at him, his voice calm yet sharp. "Listen, Jim, I don't care about my wife's past, but I don't appreciate anyone disrespecting her." He gently poured more wine into my glass before continuing. "I'm not some low-level employee like you assume. And my wife, Sandra, isn't just a lucky woman who married rich. She is capable, intelligent, and an important partner in my work." I crossed my arms and smiled. "I'm the vice president of Anderson Corporation, Jim." Jim looked as if he had just been punched in the face. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. "Ha ha, this is a joke, right?" He laughed nervously, but his eyes betrayed his panic. "How could you? There's no way. You were just a low-level office worker." I shrugged. I was an office worker, but that didn't mean I would stay that way forever. After our divorce, I focused on my career, earned my business degree, and worked hard. One day, Anderson Corporation offered me a management position, and I climbed my way up. And as you can see, now I'm the vice president. Jim's mouth hung open, but he couldn't come up with a response. Daniel took a sip of his wine, then placed his glass down, his sharp gaze fixed on Jim. "You brag about being a manager at Anderson Corporation. Funny, because I've never noticed you." Jim swallowed hard, desperately searching his memory. He had definitely heard of Chairman Kingston before, but he had never imagined that the man would be sitting right in front of him. Daniel continued, his voice steady yet authoritative. "In fact, I've never heard anyone in the company mention your name. I wonder if you're actually as good as you claim to be, or if you're just someone who's managed to slip through the system." I chuckled softly, tilting my head as I looked at Jim with amusement. "So, do you still think I'm just some poor woman who can only afford to come here on special occasions?" Jim said nothing. He just sat there, looking as if he had lost all faith in himself. And for the first time in years, I felt completely in control. But it wasn't over yet. After that dinner, I thought everything with Jim was finally behind me. But I was wrong. The next morning, just as I walked into my office, my phone rang repeatedly. I glanced at the screen and saw an unknown number. Something in my gut told me it wasn't good. I hesitated for a moment, then picked up the call. "Hello, Sandra." The voice on the other end was hesitant. I recognized it immediately. It was Jim. I sighed. "What do you want?" Jim cleared his throat. trying to regain his confidence, but his voice betrayed his nervousness. I think we could talk for a moment about my job. I let out a cold chuckle. Why should I care? There was a bit of a misunderstanding last night. I didn't mean to disrespect you or your husband, he hesitated. I was just surprised. No one could have imagined that you'd be the vice president, right? I mean, you're just you. I gripped my phone tighter. Even while begging for my help, he couldn't stop himself from being condescending. Jim, I cut him off coldly. Did you call just to say this? Because if so, I'm really busy. Wait, Sandra, please. His voice became more desperate. I heard about the termination decision. There has to be another way, right? You can talk to your husband, convince him to let me stay. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. And why would I do that? Jim was silent for a few seconds before his tone turned bitter. Because after all, you were my wife once. You owe me that. I laughed. I owe you? Yes, you wouldn't be where you are today without me. If it weren't for me, you'd still just be a low-level office worker with no future. A slow, simmering anger rose inside me. Is that what you really think, Jim? I spoke slowly, emphasizing every word. You really think I owe my success to you? Silence. For the first time, he seemed to realize he had said the wrong thing. I continued, let me make one thing clear. I am where I am today not because of you. I got here because I worked hard. Because I refused to let anyone, including you, define my worth. And you still don't realize the most important thing. What? Jim asked, his voice now laced with unease. You're not being fired because of last night. You're being fired because of your attitude, because of how you treat your colleagues, and because of your degrading remarks about women in the company. My voice was sharp as a blade. This was bound to happen sooner or later. You have no one to blame but yourself. No, Sandra, please. His voice broke, desperation creeping in. I know I messed up. I didn't mean to. That's just how I talk. You know me, right? I was just exaggerating a little. I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. No, Jim, you weren't just exaggerating a little. You disrespected me, you disrespected the women in the company, and now you're facing the consequences. He panted, as if desperately searching for a final excuse. Daniel is there, isn't he? He asked quickly. Let me talk to him, I can explain. I scoffed. Do you really think my husband will listen to you after everything you've said? Jim was desperate. Please, Sandra, I'm going to lose everything. I can't lose this job. I sighed, then responded coldly, then you should have thought about that before opening your mouth and insulting people. And with that I hung up. A few minutes later I walked into the conference room where Daniel was reviewing a stack of documents. He looked up as soon as he saw me, as if he already knew what had happened. Jim called you, didn't he? His voice was calm. I nodded. He begged me to help him keep his job. Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. I figured he would. I shrugged. He still doesn't see his mistakes. Daniel nodded, then picked up his pen and signed the document in front of him. Then let him learn this lesson the hard way. I glanced at the paper. Jim's termination order. And for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. But Daniel didn't fire Jim immediately. Instead, he made a decision I hadn't expected. He reassigned Jim to the Ohio branch. I knew about that branch. It was a tiny office in a remote town, nearly forgotten by the corporation. There, Jim wouldn't have a large team, no opportunities for advancement, and most importantly, no authority to exploit. When Jim received the reassignment notice, he reacted furiously. No, I can't go there, he practically shouted during his meeting with HR. I'm a senior manager, you can't send me to some place like that. Daniel simply looked at him, his expression cold and unyielding. You have two choices, Jim. Either you accept the transfer or you resign. The decision is yours. Jim clenched his fists, his jaw tightening, but he had no other option. A few weeks later I heard that Jim and Monica had moved to Ohio. Life there was anything but easy for them. No more upscale restaurants, no more lavish parties, and no one for Jim to assert his false sense of power over. He was isolated, stuck in a tiny office with only one subordinate, where his job consisted of nothing but dull reports and meaningless meetings with local clients. Monica couldn't take it. After just 4 months, she packed her bags and returned to the city. You told me we'd have a better life, she shouted before boarding her one-way flight out of Ohio. "You said you were a successful man, but you're nothing but a failure." Jim tried to hold on to his job, but it wasn't long before he realized there was no way back to his former position. No one at the headquarters remembered him, and no one cared about his complaints. He had been completely forgotten. After a year of enduring a meaningless existence in Ohio, Jim finally submitted his resignation. He thought that with his experience he would easily land a better job. But the real world didn't work the way he imagined. No company wanted to hire a former manager who had been reassigned under suspicious circumstances. No reputable firm would take on someone with such a questionable track record. Slowly, his savings dwindled. Jim was forced to move into a rundown apartment in the suburbs where he had to face the bitter reality: he had lost everything. The only job he could find was a night shift at a convenience store, where he stood behind the counter watching customers come and go, none of whom recognized or cared about him. A man who once bragged about his power and status was now just a quiet store clerk, sweeping the floors at 3 a.m. Unlike Jim, my life had never been better. Daniel continued to be the husband I was endlessly grateful to have met. Not only was he a successful man, but he was also kind, protective, and cherished me in a way Jim never had. No matter how busy he was, he always made time for our monthly date nights. Sometimes it was a quiet dinner at a cozy little restaurant we loved. Other times it was a weekend getaway to Napa Valley, just the two of us, sipping wine and having endless conversations. I know I made the right decision when I walked away from Jim. There are moments in life when we must face our past, but what truly matters is not looking back with regret. It's moving forward. I moved forward, and I am happy. As for Jim, he was left behind. Sandra's story is not just a lesson in love and happiness, it is proof that a person's worth is not defined by their past or their background, but by their determination to rise above it. Jim represents those who are arrogant, who look down on others, never realizing that the world does not wait for them. In contrast, Sandra stands for those who have the courage to walk away from toxic situations and reclaim their own worth. In real life, everyone has the chance to rewrite their story, if they are brave enough to take the next step. What do you think about this story? Do you believe Jim deserved his fate, or could he have changed if he had realized his mistakes sooner? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more compelling stories about life and family.